Please remember that nothing we say here should be taken as personal advice. The conversation is for entertainment purposes only. If you have questions about your financial situation, please talk to a licensed financial advisor. All right, welcome to another episode of Future Money, where we talk about the investments of the future
that will make us money.
All right, special guest today.
Yes. We have Andi Ortiz. We are very lucky to have Andi. Hey, Andi.
Hello, I'm very lucky to be here. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for coming on. Andi is a reporter at the Wrap. Wrap is one of the premier entertainment news source and really the go-to to understand anything about the media and entertainment business. And we have you today because we want to talk about what's going on in Hollywood.
There is a lot going on in Hollywood right now. But yes, you summed it up very well. The Wrap is where you want to go if you're trying to understand this. And I mean, even if you're just like a normal person who has no idea until today that the strikes were happening, we have the coverage. We can get you up to speed, and also just movie news, TV news. But yeah, you covered. We're here for you. We're making it fun and easy. It's a lot of fun.
If you didn't know there was a strike until today, you're living in Mars, and maybe not even that. Maybe somewhere further than that.
That's true, yes. But I'm hearing some people are saying, like, I just saw someone the other day that it was like they didn't know there was a strike happening, and I was like, that's amazing to me. But yeah.
I wonder if it's an LA thing. I mean, obviously we have clients in the entertainment business, but in LA, you definitely like there's you can't walk around without talking to somebody who's being affected by it. So maybe if you live in like Alabama or Iowa, they're not really knowing what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, it seems like there's a lot of strikes in general right now.
Everyone's feeling like Europe, buddy.
Yeah, it feels like France for sure.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll start a little bit, Andi, talk about high level. What's the strike about? I know the WGA has been striking for almost, 4 months now.
Yeah. Writers Guild.
Yeah. The Writers Guild. Yeah. And then the actors joined about a month ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's a contentious time between studios and actors and writers and so forth. So maybe let's talk a little bit of high level about what a strike is about and what's going on.
Yeah, of course. The strike, it's about a lot of things. There are a lot of things that are going into these contract negotiations that the writers and the actors are fighting for. The biggest sticking points, at least from what I've seen, it's been AI and the impact that AI has already had and could continue to have because it's only going to keep growing. It's residuals and it is mini rooms. Mini rooms are a huge thing, at least for the writers. And so really they're renegotiating these contracts and they're trying to up their wages and they're trying to make sure that they get fairly compensated for everything and that that things that they create are used with proper permission and proper rights. And there's a lot to get into. But those are from the writers and actors that I've spoken to, those are the big sticking points. It's AI, it's residuals, and it's mini rooms, and it's really the future of the industry.
So let's talk about each one of those. I think.
Yeah, a lot to unpack.
So let's talk about our favorite topic. I think everyone's favorite topic this year, which is AI.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you're in tech, AI has been a big thing. But I think a lot of people are a little bit sort of confused or don't really understand the impact AI is having in Hollywood and why this is such a big sticking point. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Of course. So AI is impacting both the writers and the actors, but it's impacting them in different ways. So obviously you've heard of ChatGPT. Everybody knows ChatGPT at this point. And ChatGPT, guys, I say words for a living and still a tip like this is what's going to happen.
It's a hard one.
It is. It's a quick one. But with ChatGPT, a lot of people are using it for a lot of different reasons now. I mean, just outside of Hollywood, you've got applications in education. People like students are using it to write papers and to do all these things. So the fear with AI from the writer's perspective is that eventually studios could theoretically just plug in, okay, we want a script about this and like just broad concepts and it will spit something out. The issues that the writers then have with that is that it's AI. It's it's not a story coming from humans. And you know,
Right.
one of the things that I've heard a lot, we at the Wrap, we've had a couple of strike roundtables, so we've spoken to WGA members and about their concerns, and so you can check that, shameless plug, you can check that out over on the wrap.com. But their concern is that these AI generated scripts, these AI generated stories, they're not going to have that human element. They're just going to check boxes, and they're not going to have any kind of coherency, any kind of like emotional tug. So that's, you know, from the writers. And then it also then puts writers out of the job, even if it's not exactly high quality. It's still doing the work that these people are trying to do and fighting to do. And then from the actor's perspective, AI, it is in terms of their images, their likenesses. AI can generate whole people now. And when I went and, you know, I was reporting on the picket lines, and actors that I spoke to, one showed me, he brought it up on his phone. He's like, I plugged this checklist of things into this AI model, and this is the person that spit out. This person's not real, though. This person is not a real thing. And also in terms of using their likenesses, you've got major franchises that AI, like CGI and AI, are really going to be huge pieces. And if they're walking in to get scanned for a superhero suit or for any of these like futuristic things, they want to ensure that their likeness is then not used in the future. So, and I mean, we have like de-aging technology now. AI can be applied in a lot of ways on either side. So that's why AI in particular is a big sticking point for both the writers and for the actors.
Yes, but the genie is out of the bottle, right? Like there is a lot of benefits that come with having these technology tools, and frankly, this for many years, right? We had a lot of technology that came in and just kind of, you know, did things differently. The writers want AI to be removed from basically the entertainment business, right? Which is probably unlikely at this point. Do we like, where do we go from this? Like, I think it's an IP issue. Isn't it like a intellectual property rights issue? Isn't that what we need to start looking at?
Theoretically, so because AI can be applied in different ways for the writers and the actors, for the actors, I would probably agree personally that genie's out of the bottle for AI. It's a technology that exists. It's going to be used. And you'll notice that the actors, not necessarily striking and saying that we want AI gone entirely, they want it regulated. They want to be compensated if AI is using their likeness, if it's going to be used for future projects.
For sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of, it's in terms of how to regulate it. I mean, that's going to come down to negotiations and whatnot. I honestly, I don't know that I know a way. I mean, that's not my kind of knowledge base. But it's certainly, it's there, and it's just something that is going to have to be contended with at some point or another. And they're contending with it now.
Well, with the writers, you know, there's always obviously pushback against technologies when they come back from whatever generation preceded that technology. But is writers trying to ban AI any different than the people who, you know, when farming came about and, you know, we had supermassive machines, you know, replacing the jobs of hundreds of people? Like, any technology is ultimately going to supplant somebody else. I think the winners end up becoming the people who adopted that technology to their specific skill set and use it to enhance. Like, I don't really believe we think that ChatGPT is going to be writing all of Netflix's shows.
I think the difference is before technology helped kind of maximize or helped optimize the output, now writers are afraid it's going to just replace them. Right.
But again, so like anything else, when the internet came out, millions of people, you know, I always joke that, you know, I've been working for 14 years now. I've been, like, let's call myself an adult for 20 years now. and ever since I've been an adult,
I get it.
Ever since I've been an adult, I've heard that technology is going to replace us every single year for the last 20 years, whether it was the internet or it was mobile phones or it was whatever the case may be. And I think throughout history and humanity, the winners have been the people who have used it as a tool and enhanced their experience. So while I don't think ChatGPT is going to be writing all of Netflix's shows, the winners might be the people who use ChatGPT to generate ideas or use any of these you know, things to generate ideas and ultimately add their human spin on it. Because we all, like, we've read ChatGPT stuff and I'm sure it's going to get better, but like, there's obviously things in there that are not human like.
Yeah.
When you come up with it. So I just like, I feel like we always have this conversation about technology. It's a destructive process at some point, but eventually we end up coming about. And I joke, I go, oh, technology is going to replace us. Meanwhile, we have the lowest unemployment we've had in 50 years.
Yeah. The problem though, the destruction is happening really fast in Hollywood, right, Andy?
Yes,
Yeah.
AI is very much becoming a thing. And the thing is, I mean, it's like you mentioned, like it's maybe not at that level yet, but it could quickly, or at least what the writers are saying. And I, by no means, I want to make it very clear, I am not speaking on behalf of the writers. I am not speaking on behalf of the WGA. I am not a member. I am simply relaying what I have, heard and had conversations with. It's that like, it's unknown what it could be. And so what they're looking for is regulations and just kind of not necessarily guarantees but that it won't replace them, but like they're looking to make sure. I mean, a lot of the writers I've spoken to have said that this is a fight for the existence of their profession, because even if it is eliminating the lower level people, if it spits out a script and you just build on that, it's still maybe replacing the people who would initially write that lower level script. So it's hard.
Yeah. And you know, the reality is all these chat GPT and these kind of large language models have been trained on IP that's owned by writers already, right? So I think there is a path to really kind of litigation there, whereby some of the WGA or some of the writers have to go back and, sue either Google or Microsoft, whomever is doing these language models, and really kind of make sure that they don't train them on IP that's already been owned by someone.
So I can't really speak much in terms of litigation. I don't know what that future looks like, but in terms the language thing, I want to latch onto that, because that is something that also that the writers have been, speaking about, is they want very specific language in their new contract about what AI can do and what AI can be allowed to get into, because that's what it is, right? It's you're feeding these things and AI is going to learn, and it's the language. They want very specific language in how AI can be used going forward.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, one thing we know is that regulation and litigation are really fast processes. So by the time
I think actually litigation will be faster than regulation.
For sure.
Yeah,
for sure. But now we're talking about like 5 years versus 10, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the second contention point, right? Which is, royalties and really monies, right? Like, how does that work? And I think there is two basically business models, right, in Hollywood right now: the streaming model and then the royalty model. Let's talk about what the writer or actors and writers want from Netflix and Disney and really the producers. And also have a question is, should they really all be in the same room? Like, should Netflix and Apple and Amazon be in the same room with Disney and Warner Brothers and all the other guys? Like, I mean, there is kind of almost conflicting needs here, or conflicting kind of, so I think that's something that I would love to explore.
In some ways, yes, it is conflicting needs, but also, I mean, Disney is a streamer at this point. Disney is a legacy studio, and they're obviously a huge legacy studio. Everyone knows, but they do have Disney Plus. They have streaming content to worry about, and same with Warner Brothers. I mean, they've got Max. Warner Brothers Discovery has Max, and so in many ways, yes, they very much should be in the conversation or in the room with Netflix, with Apple TV Plus, because they do have streaming services. Obviously, with the legacy studios, they then have, their bigger films to worry about as well. But yeah, at this point, most of the major studios are streamers at this point, and streaming is very much kind of at the core of the residuals topic.
Yep.
Yeah, but so let's talk for a second about that, right? So you have the streaming model, the Netflix model, let's call it, where Netflix makes the big investment up front,
right?
And they take a lot of the financial risk. So from their perspective, right, they deserve the financial reward because they're taking the financial risk. So is there a middle ground between what Netflix, like between the old model of royalties and, we always talk about
residuals,
well,
residual
income, like, we talk about this old model of like getting paid for these, like, what is your IP worth if it's sitting on a streamer? Like, is old episodes of some random. We're not going to use the big ones like Friends or Seinfeld, which obviously have huge numbers. But like you make a show and then it just sits on your streamer, right? And it's a mid-level show. Like, what's the actual value of that? Should these people be that are getting residuals for this just sitting on a streamer versus like being on a network show?
Right. I think it varies show to show in terms of success, because you may have those mid-level shows that really, like, maybe they didn't find an audience, maybe they only ran for 2 or 3 seasons and they really didn't, make it big. They didn't become Friends, they didn't become a Gilmore Girls. There's still a fan base though. There's still people that watch those shows. There are still people that maybe discover shows late. There are plenty of shows that end up getting discovered late. I mean, there's a show right now, Suits, that is having a resurgence because it's streaming. And it maybe wasn't, I don't know the numbers offhand. I don't remember the ratings offhand for when Suits was on the air, but it's been off the air for quite some time. And now it's seeing a boom. It's like #1, and because people are coming to it. So
Thanks,
even
Netflix.
these mid-level shows, they are finding their fan base. There are people that watch it and then consume that content and theoretically then create, monetary income, monetary reward for the streamers that have those shows.
Right. Yeah, I think the problem here, right, is you either take the money up front and you make a show and you sell it to Netflix, right? Or you take a risk of making a show and hopefully it kind of takes off and you make some residuals, right? Netflix is not willing to do both, right? Or I think most streamers are not willing to do the both because they're making all the investments up front, right? Like, how do we reconcile those two models? Do you feel like there is a solution there? Is there a place to go to? Like, is there a resolution, or is just the models are just completely different?
I mean, I think there is a resolution. What that resolution is, I don't know. That takes people much smarter than me, much more experienced than I am in terms of figuring out those models. But I think that for the strike to eventually come to a close, which eventually it will, eventually this will get resolved. When it's going to happen remains unclear at this point. But eventually a deal, I assume, I would think, has to be reached. And it's one of those things. It's one of those sticking points that they want to see. Like, this is a huge point for them. So I think there has to be a middle ground where they figure something out. What that is going to look like, I really think it could go one of many ways. I think that there has to be. I think for this strike to eventually come to its conclusion, I think there's going to have to be middle ground found.
Yeah. That's the negotiating process, right? Everybody leaves not happy.
Yeah, I'm afraid, because Netflix has spent so much money over the last 10 years, and now you got Apple, who also has billions of dollars, and Amazon. These are just new players who, streaming is not core to their business. It's something that they just add on to their services, right? So for them, they don't really need to play the same rules that Disney or another player has to. So I'm afraid like there is those conflicts of interest or like they don't have the same urgency to get things done the way that it was done before. So that's really I'm worried about.
I mean, I think, and I think we'll talk about this more later. I just think they can hold out. They really just, like you said, Apple doesn't really need this that much. Like their iPhone 15 is about to come out next week. So I don't think they're in a rush to be like, spending billions of dollars on content. They unfortunately can hold out longer.
Yep. Great. So that's
what was the third one?
Sorry, the mini rooms, the mini rooms, and this one is fresh in my mind because we just did a roundtable on it over at the Wrap. Mini rooms are very much core to the WGA side of things, and like you mentioned earlier, they've been on strike for nearly 150 days at this point. I mean, they've been on strike since May. Mini rooms are a key thing for them. And what a mini room is, for those who are unaware, a mini room it's a room of writers that are assembled by a showrunner, by a studio before a show, often before a show is even greenlit. They pitch an idea and the studio says like, okay, like we're interested, write us a season or like write us several episodes to see if it's viable. And then so this mini room comes together, they write these episodes, and then they send the episodes to the studio and then hopefully get greenlit.
Right.
And so it's a lot. And often what happens in those mini rooms is those writers are then paid at scale. They're not paid as they would be during like an entire season. And also with mini rooms, it's a little bit more unpredictable. It could be a couple of weeks. It could then be extended into a couple of months. So mini rooms in terms of pay, especially, that is a big piece for the WGA.
So they want these mini rooms to stay, or they want more bigger rooms? Like what's exactly
So it varies. So one thing that I learned recently is that mini rooms, like they don't have to be mini. Like it's part of the name, sure, but they don't have to be mini. So it could
And what's
be
many? 2 to 3 writers? Like what
it
is
could be 2 to 3 writers. It could be something like 4 to 5. An average writer's room for like a season of television might have somewhere from like 10 to 12, double digits.
Right.
But a mini room doesn't mean it's only going to be a very few number of writers. Often that is the case. So they're not advocating for mini rooms to go away entirely, from what I understand. From the people that I've spoken to, it's just with mini rooms, they want a minimum staffing number. Words just fully, like the entire English language just fully exited my brain for a second there. It was just sort of a stall and a reboot. So with the mini rooms, they would like a minimum staffing requirement. And the thing is, when you're writing this content in these mini rooms, it often, at least from one showrunner's perspective, she noted that like a lot of what's written in a mini room doesn't necessarily make it to the final product of what you see on television, what you see on streaming.
Right.
And so they want security. I mean, they want to know, because what's happening is for a lot of writers, they're in this mini room and then their day in the mini room ends, and then they're jumping on a Zoom call trying to like secure the next job. It's very much kind of, they don't know always where their next paycheck is coming from. If the mini room is about to end, they're just trying to figure out how they're going to provide for their family. So they want a staffing minimum to make sure that people are taken care of. They want their rates to be a fair and equitable rate. And again, I keep plugging this, but I promise you the writers are so much better at explaining this than I am. We have our strike roundtable. I did moderate it over at thewrap.com, and they get very into detail on what they're looking for specifically with mini rooms. But I know that it's becoming, with more and more shows, it's sort of becoming the norm. And that's something, mini rooms are something that 100% it came in with the streamers. Like it wasn't a thing in previous models of, broadcast television.
I mean, with so much money spent in content over the last few years, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was so much money gone to Hollywood, right? And I think now that the streaming is kind of starting to mature almost, right? And losses are kind of accumulated, and these streamers really trying to kind of cut cost to almost force them to have a certain amount of writers. Sounds to me like it's almost preposterous, right?
And I think we were going to, so like you're talking about streaming numbers, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's worth it to share some numbers from these companies.
Let's do it.
Just to like see the absolute like amount of spend, right? So when Netflix came into the game, obviously they changed everything. Like the way content spend happened, they just basically forced everybody into this game ultimately, where it's this arms race of content. And basically Netflix spent almost 17 billion in content last year, which was down from like 18 the year before. So, they haven't gone up. Disney spent 10.5 billion, Warner Brothers 9 billion, Paramount 8, Comcast 7. So
that's 50 billion.
An insane amount of money. Yeah. Like
okay.
Basically $50 billion plus have been spent on content, like an insane amount of money, well more than, 10 years ago or whatever. To your point, Hatem, there's only one company that's actually making money on streaming, and that's Netflix. Right. So Netflix is actually, did 4.5 billion in net income last year, 3 billion so far this year. So, we talked about this when the strike started, is the strike might be better for these companies. They kind of embracing it, because Disney, who lost $4 billion streaming last year. And obviously they're cutting costs now, and the projections for how much they're going to lose this year is much lower now because of the strike. So I just fear, like, Disney loses, let's see, HBO, Warner Brothers is going to lose $2 billion this year. Peacock lost, almost $1.5 billion in the first half of the year. So these companies are accumulating losses.
So they have to stop these.
They have to stop the bleeding, basically.
Right?
Disney just went on a rampage and just spent so much money because trying to keep up with Netflix. And I think because they had this legacy business, they're like, oh, we can do this. We can afford. We have this other pot of money that we can pull from to ultimately.
I guess your question to Andy is, maybe we spent too much money on content the last few years, and now we have just to pare that back. And this is kind of where the conflict is today.
Yeah. Well, Andy, what's the incentive for them?
Well, so what's happening, to your point, with how much they are putting into content, that then is being felt by the writers that I've spoken to. When you ask them, what's the vibe inside a writer's room, or what's the vibe inside a mini room specifically, it's they said that pressure is a good way to put it, because what's happening is all of these streamers are coming in and they want the next big, they want the next Game of Thrones, they want the next massive show. And what's going to happen is, if it's not a hit out the gate, then they're not going to, put additional money into it, put additional time and resources into it. And then, so what happens is you then have a lot of turnover, and then you have a ton of shows. Like over at Netflix, they put out a ton of content.
Right.
And so that's not necessarily conducive to at least good working conditions from the writers, from the writers' perspectives, because they're feeling the pressure. They're being told, you need to make this next big thing, and it needs to be great, and it needs to make us money. But they're being told these things. They're being told, we need to find the next big thing. You need to emulate this. And then in some cases, what's happening, and this is a story that a writer just recounted to us, was that him and his fellow writers were told, okay, so this is the show that's trending on Twitter right now, so you want to be something like this. And then they spent weeks trying to emulate that, trying to create scripts for the show. And then they take it in and they're told, oh, well, no one's really talking about that show anymore, so you want it to be more like this. And so a lot of that, then, because they are chasing their money, they're trying to chase the investment that they put into it, there's potentially a sacrifice of quality happening, right? There's this conversation of it needs to be great, it needs to be all these things, and if it's not, then they pull the plug on it, and then that theoretically adds up to, if we're talking numbers, which again, numbers not my thing, but just in a broad sense of things, if you're going to pull the plug on something that early, that's going to almost inevitably be a loss. And there are plenty of shows that needed a couple seasons to find their legs. I can think of Parks and Rec off the bat. The first season of Parks and Rec, maybe not universally beloved, but that show went on to become a staple in pop culture.
Right.
And I personally, I don't know if a show like that could exist now, because it wouldn't necessarily be given the time to find its legs. So to what you're saying, the investment that they're making is certainly being felt in terms of what they're asking for back. And that is, there's maybe, I don't know if it's a panic. I don't want to speak for the writers. I also don't want to speak for the studios. Maybe it's a panic that they're trying to make their money back. But I do know that, just based on what has been relayed to me, that there is certainly pressure felt in terms of it needs to be the next big thing. And now I'm spinning in circles. I'm sorry. I don't mean to repeat myself.
No, but listen, to be honest, Hollywood has always been a hit machine, right? Has always about who's going to get the next hit, who's going to
movies, right?
Exactly.
That basically make your year, and your other indies and all those lose money for the rest of the year. And then you have an Avengers movie that comes and brings in $3 billion.
Totally. But I think now with the streaming, because of the economics have changed, right? Yes, Netflix has new subscribers if they have a hit show, or even Disney Plus, if the new, Star Wars come out, they'll have more subscribers. But ultimately, I don't think there is the transparency of how successful these shows are on the streamers, to reward the creators.
Right.
Maybe something that can help really solve some of these problems, right?
Well, and that's something that is a sticking point as well. The writers and the actors, they want more transparency, because from showrunners I've spoken to, particularly on streamers, they don't see the data. They're told your show is doing well. It's doing great for us. You're getting renewed. Thank you so much. Bring us more. They aren't actually seeing any hard data. I've spoken to to multiple showrunners in the past or creators in the past where they with their streaming shows, they don't get that hard data. So transparency is absolutely something that they are fighting for, because I mean, they want to know how it's performing, and they would like to know exactly how much their creative work is bringing in for these studios.
Yeah, but just to play devil's advocate here, right? So let's rewind to 15 years ago, pre-Netflix, and the old studio model, the old, cable network model. Like you said, it was a hit machine thing too. Also, there were 4 or 5 shows maybe that made a lot of the revenue for companies.
Yeah,
and they all competed against it, and it was the same competition. Netflix comes in, throws 10x of the money on top of content creation. Everybody, this arms race that I talked about, everybody jumps in, and it was this sort of like golden era over the last 5 to 10 years of content generation. Almost like, right, we maybe we peaked, maybe
we got drunk on content.
Like there were times where I was like, I don't know what to watch because there's too many things to watch.
Yep. That was absolutely a thing.
Yeah. And now, like, maybe we're coming back down to earth a little bit. Maybe this scenario needed to happen. There's like sort of like the stock market doesn't always go up. It has to come back down a little bit. That's how because like, writers and again, we have clients who are writers, who are actors. We have clients who are studio executives. So, we see both. We see both sides of all this, but like, I remember I had clients who would literally, like, earlier in the Netflix years, would just get a 50% pay bump. They're just like, what happened? You're like, oh, it's just things happen, and now I get 50% more money, or other studios.
Well, I think more so it's existential to the model. I think that's why this strike is so important, right? Like, how do you get paid in the future with AI coming in and also changing the dynamics there too. So I think really that's why this is such an important time to figure out what it is. And as we know, Netflix used to be a darling. And, 10 years ago, as you said, because they were throwing so much money around Hollywood. Now are they becoming the evil genius, or like what from your perspective? You're talking to a lot of people in the industry,
right?
What's the perception of Netflix and some
of Netflix? So I don't know what it is for Netflix specifically. I know that in general, my perception, how I perceive this is there's discontent, right? There's discontent with the streamers because from what I have been told, and from the conversations that I have had, it feels a lot to these people like it's like tech bros coming in. It's not necessarily creatives coming in and making these decisions. And that's one of the things that the writers have spoken about as well. And I know I focus a lot on the writers. Obviously, the actors are striking too, and for a lot of the same issues. But one of the things that comes up is like, it feels like for the writers, a lot of notes are coming on their scripts from an algorithm. And so there's discontent because what's happening is, particularly with the streamers, because they are trying to make the money, because it really is still a race. I mean, it's maybe we have peaked, maybe the streaming bubble has burst. There are still so many streamers to contend with. And that's something that a consumer has to think. I mean, you pay monthly for these streamers, so there are so many to choose from. And you were saying that you reached a point where like you didn't know what to watch. There's also that decision of like, well, I don't know like where to watch, or like if I want to watch this show that everybody's talking about, it's on this streamer. So there is still this race that's going on. There's still this huge competition amongst streamers. And I know that just from the creative side of things, there's discontent because it feels like, because they're still trying to crank out all this content. And I would say that, excuse me, I would say that especially during pandemic times, there was this, we need to churn things out for people because people are home. When you're home,
we had too much time.
Right. When you're home all day, every day for like 2.5 years, no one expected to be home for that. Like there was a lot of demand to be watching things. So all of that to say is there is still very much this competition happening in terms of perspective, in terms of how these people view the streamers. I couldn't speak to one in particular, but I know that from what I've been told, it's a lot of discontent in terms of tech bros coming in. They're coming in, they're trying to make money, and they're making number-based decisions, which like, It's a business. Hollywood is a business. And that's one thing that I've heard also is these people don't begrudge the studios for wanting to make money. That's how like it's just a necessity. They don't begrudge the studios trying to make their money. What they get upset about is not getting their fair share of the cut, their fair share of the pie. So that's what it comes down to is they want this strike to end. They want to get back. All these people want to get back to work.
Sure.
But they also want to make sure that they are getting paid fairly for that work, and they want to make sure that they are being protected when they do that work. So right now, in terms of perception, I think there's also a lot of frustration that like the studios, like you said, they do have this money. And they excuse me, that they do have this money and they're not willing to part with it. That's kind of the feeling is they have this money, they're not willing to part with it.
You got to share more basically from the pie.
That's
I think the tech bros comment is absolutely true. I do also know that Ted Sarandos and Reed Hastings from Netflix were very much loved in Hollywood because they came in, they brought so much money, so much innovation. They were greenlighting a lot of shows that would never
reach anywhere.
They were never greenlit by, your traditional Hollywood mafia, if you want to call it, right? So I think that is that story that we haven't we need to kind of remember, right?
Yeah, for sure. Listen, when a strike happens, there's going to be a resolution, like you said, at some point.
At some point, there will be a resolution.
There will be. Both sides will have to move a little bit.
Economic impact in California so far is $5 billion.
Right.
So it's a big hit to our economy at this point. Because, it's not just the writers, right? You got nobody's working. Caterers, gaffers, production crews,
right. all these crew members, catering, all these things, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. And and everybody thinks, it's for the writer side, for the actor side, like people think of writers and actors as like these high level people, like they're writing these big shows, but we know that most writers are just trying to make a living writing. They're just trying to get by to the next, like you said, to the next project they're working on. It's not a 9 to 5 where they have everything coming in every day. So we definitely sympathize and empathize with what they're going through, because a lot of them, even the ones that are doing fairly well, not like the high end, are struggling. They are very much struggling. And like you said, the gaffers, the grips, these guys who aren't even they're not trying to get residuals. They're just trying to get work. You know what I mean? And so it's hard on everybody for sure. I fear that Netflix has broken the system that everybody's used to. And that the new reality is, maybe Netflix budges a little bit, but the new reality is like, hey, this is the way things go. Everybody's on a streaming platform, and we're making all the financial investment. It's this whole.
That's never going to go. That's never going to happen. Like
what?
Like the residuals have to stay.
Yeah, some residuals, but the residual that the year. Listen. When how many shows had like these insane residuals, right? You have the big ones that of, but like think of like Netflix probably has more shows this year than like NBC had for like 10 years. You know what I mean? So like there's so much out there. And again, the opposite argument is these guys never would have even had that show, had a chance to put that show on. So it's a new world. Like Netflix built, it's like building an old city, right? You build a new city on top of an old city. This is why the other streamers are having a problem. I like to use the analogy of like, you build a city on top of Rome, which is a 2,500-year-old city.
It's not going to be the same.
It's not going to be the same as building Dubai from the ground up and in a fancy new digital world. Like this is where we live. And so everybody's I feel like, yes, there's going to be some residuals, but in the end, we're going to have to part with this like network model that used to exist.
It's a tough problem.
It's hard. And that's why we've reached a standstill. And in terms of models, you'll notice that like people like streamers like Netflix are changing their model in some ways. Netflix for a while, it was release it all, binge all the episodes at once. And that became a standard for all streamers. It became Netflix dropped all their episodes at once. You watch them all and you get to binge those shows. Now you'll notice that there are a couple shows that are doing, they'll do a batch release. Very few shows go weekly anymore. And from a TV fan perspective, not even from a business standpoint, but just from like a TV fan perspective, I've always preferred the weekly model because as much as you want to know what happens next, it makes shows just like instantly forgettable. I can binge something and then a month later I'll be like, oh yeah, I watched that show, but I couldn't tell you anything about it.
Oh, I never thought of it that way. Like,
Yeah.
because for me, I love to watch at my own time, right? Sometimes I work. Like, who's at home on a Tuesday at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m., whatever, like that model, I think doesn't really make sense for a lot of people, right? So having the ability to watch things on demand as you want them, when you want them, I think it's a much better product for people.
Yeah, I think she's saying like, right. So like I'm watching Winning Time on HBO, right? But they only drop one show a week.
Yeah.
And I hate it, but I love it. But I hate it also.
You stick around, you don't cancel your subscription. Like you don't get a free trial subscription to binge a show because a lot of places will give you a free month. So that people get subscriptions to then watch Winning Time, to watch like a Ted Lasso, and then they don't necessarily see those people sticking around. So theoretically, a weekly model again, like what numbers go into this, I do not know, but a weekly model will keep people around longer. It'll keep them coming back. And I mean, how many shows did you watch during the pandemic time that like you binged it? And if I asked you anything about it right now, you wouldn't be able to tell me. So, like,
I can't even remember back to it seems like a different era that I tried like blocked out in my mind.
BC.
Exactly. And so so that's what's happening. So in terms of the model, it has changed a lot, and the impacts of how it has changed a lot is seen in a lot of different ways. And because the model will almost certainly continue to keep changing, that's then, what the negotiations are happening is there's no way to know, but they would like to be prepared. They would like to kind of prepare as best as they possibly can. So, but yes, in the end, it's hard because Hollywood is a business and studios are trying to make their money, but writers and actors, they're people. Sure. And you talk about how most writers and actors aren't necessarily the big wigs. They're not making that crazy money. I mean, there's a stat for, at least I believe it's for SAG-AFTRA, and I would have to double check this, but it's something like 87%, 86%. It's over 80% of their membership doesn't reach like the minimums that they need to make in a year to get their health insurance, and that minimum is $26,000. And this is something that like I had to explain to my therapist. Ironically enough, we were talking about things, and she was asking me, because she knows what I do for a living, and so she was asking me like about the strikes because she wanted to know more. And she's like, I mean, aren't these people already making more than most? And I kind of like, you have to explain to her that there are these misconceptions that happen in terms of who's making what, who's investing what. So like the numbers, it's a lot of math and a lot of business decisions that go into it, and it's hard. And that's why, I mean, it's hard, but also if you ask the writers, the actors, what they're asking for, I mean, they've laid it out in a chart. They're asking for something like less than 1% of what the studios make in a year, or what the CEOs make in a year. I don't remember how those numbers shake out, but it's a lot. It's a lot to kind of parse through and figure out, like, is there a right way to do it? Is there not a right way to do it?
Yeah. Okay. So, thank you for breaking this down, because it's definitely complex.
I hope I made it palatable.
You definitely did. No, you definitely did. It's a complex issue, and it's basically destructive construction, if you want to call it, happens in capitalism all the time. And
creative destruction.
Exactly. Sorry about that. Creative destruction.
Yeah.
Who's winning? Like, is there any winners from here, like TikTok and sports? Like, is there anybody who's winning from this?
It's hard to say, because it's the writers and the actors have been on strike for over 100 days, or almost 150 days for the writers, and we're looking at, I believe we're 2 months in for the actors. So they're not winning in the sense of like they're not making their money. They're really some of them are having to sell their homes and to do all these things and figure out childcare and eat on the picket line. So they're not winning in that sense. but they could be winning in the sense of getting their message out there. So you have a big event like San Diego Comic-Con, right? That is at this point fueled by stars appearing. And we wrote up our winners and losers of Comic-Con, and we argued that SAG-AFTRA and the WGA were winners in that sense because their message got out, people are aware, and like you said at the very start, there's a lot of labor movements happening around the country right now, or around the world right now. There's a lot of labor movements happening. So they're losing in the sense of like they're really struggling for their existence right now, and they're really fighting because that is the biggest thing that I have heard is one person told me that it feels like they have to get it right on this time, like on this negotiation round, they have to get it right this time, or they're just kind of screwed going forward. And I apologize to put it so bluntly like that, but they really do feel like they're fighting for the existence of their profession, of their whole, of their, not of their life. I mean, like they're not their lifestyle. I don't know how to phrase it, but like
their livelihood.
Their livelihood. Thank you.
Livelihood.
That is the word I was
Yeah.
looking for. Their livelihood.
Yeah.
I was like, it's not lifestyle, it's not lives. Livelihood. Thank you. So it really does feel like that. So losing in the sense of that, but also winning in getting the message out. And then the studios, they are losing money. I mean, you talked about tent poles earlier. Tent poles had to be moved. Dune Part 2 isn't coming out this year anymore. And
Thank
that
God.
I was looking forward to watching Dune. Come on.
I couldn't get through it. I'm sorry.
I love part 1. Okay.
I will say I have not seen it.
I'm just
Dune
kidding about the thing.
I've heard it's very long. But
very
Dune
long.
2, it got moved, and that was a huge tentpole for them.
Yeah. So what happens when you have we won't have a lot of content coming out next year or so, right?
Your fall TV season is going to look very different right now. I mean, granted, there's still some time. But at this point, there's not going to be a lot of TV shows coming on in the fall, like coming on broadcast and streamers and whatnot. And it's so studios are losing in that sense. Like as much as it may feel like they're trying to strong arm everything, they don't have this content, they don't have this publicity, they don't have this. At the end of the day, they don't have this money rolling in.
Right.
So it's hard to say who's winning and who's losing. It's what can be said definitively is that they are both digging their heels in. And so it's very interesting to watch, but it's also it's hard to watch because it's people.
For sure.
Since you talk to a lot of kind of both sides of the kind of strike, any kind of fatigue or any like, hey, let's get this figured out, like we're over this, like are you getting there or we're still like?
Well, so I mean, yes, when you're 150 days in, even when you're 60 days in, there's of course going to be fatigue of like they want to go back to work. And I know before SAG even joined WGA on strike, from reporting from the picket lines, there were people saying that like, yes, there was fatigue setting in, there was morale starting to get low. But the thing is, even if they're tired, even if they really want this to be over, they are resolved. Every single person that I've spoke to on that side of the strike has felt resolved. And then when SAG joined them, they were like, it was a shot in the arm. We feel reinvigorated, and having that SAG support is really helping them. They are also feeling the support of, because there's labor movements everywhere, every man is fighting for his job. And so there is that feeling that like they know what they're doing or it is meaningful. So yes, there is fatigue. They want to go back to work because these people they love their jobs, they love what they do, and they want to get back to it. But they are very much resolved and they know what they want, and they're going to fight as hard as they possibly can for it.
What about executives like studios? Have you talked to them, and what are you feeling from their side?
So I personally have not spoken to those on the studio sides as much. I know that, from those who have spoken to them, there is the desire. Like there is a desire on both sides to get this moving, to get everything back and protect. Because like you said, a lot of people are being affected by this. A lot of LA is being affected by this. So there is a desire, but on their side, they feel that they're not being met in their in their compromises as well. So it's a lot of back and forth of both sides saying that the other side is not coming and meeting them halfway, that there's not a lot of good faith happening. But yes, everybody wants this strike to be at this point. could feel pretty safe in saying that most of Hollywood, most of the industry wants this strike to end, but they want it to resolve in a way that's favorable to what they're fighting for.
Yeah, I would concur. I had some conversation with some studio executives, your traditional Hollywood studio executives, and they all want to get back to work. They're like, summer has been too long. It's time to go get stuff done, and then a lot of them are sympathetic to the writers and the actors. So, but I think it's just the model changing so drastically is just really kind of, just disrupting everyone really fast.
And this confluence of events, like your three things that you talked about, right? It's the residuals, it's AI. It's like at first when the strike happened, they're like, I was like, it's got to be about residuals for sure. And then they're like AI, and I was like, AI, what? I don't even know what AI has to do with this. And then I was like, okay, now I get it. So I think there's just traditional model gets broken, residuals, AI. There's just so much in the air right now. And like you were saying, like both sides are digging in their heels because they feel like, they can or they need to.
Right.
And, I think you've sort of like confirmed what I've heard a lot of is, yes, they all want to get back to work, but a lot of them feel both. Like I've talked to executives and I've talked to writers and actors, and they all feel like this is not really going to end anytime soon.
I mean, they want to get back to work, but they also want to make sure that work still exists months down the line, years down the line. They want to get back to work. They want to make sure that work still exists. They don't want it to be like a Band-Aid on a bullet hole.
Yeah. Which is really smart. The video game actors, writers as well, I think, joined the strike this week, correct?
I don't know if they've joined. I know that they were authorizing a vote. I have not seen if they have joined yet.
Okay. So that's really gonna. I mean, Snoop Dogg canceled his concert at the Hollywood Bowl, and also
he did? Why?
In unison.
In unison?
Okay. He wanted to. So I was actually going to go to that concert.
There is a lot of support in a lot of different kind of corners of every different industry. There's a lot of support.
I think the talent really understands. And look, there's something to be said about these companies being huge, multi, $100 billion conglomerates, some of them. And I know there's always this push and pull, like I always think back to like the show Entourage, like the suits versus the talent. There's always going to be this push and pull. The business people are always going to want to make money. The artists are always going to want to make art. And there's always going to be this inherent, push and pull. Let's just hope that we can have some.
I mean, I wasn't expecting that we were gonna find a solution.
No, I thought we were gonna.
Here you go, Hollywood.
Petition the WGA and
future money. Here you go. We got it.
You guys are. We got this.
No, this is obviously fascinating because it impacts all of us, our city, our town, our clients. So I'm glad you kind of shed some lights as to what's going on.
Of course.
Let's talk a little bit about the grill and the wrap and what we're doing. Yeah, because I think this is really kind of plays right into this.
It does. So the grill is an event that we have coming up. It's happening on October 4th. It is the Wrap's annual entertainment and technology conference. So we've talked a lot about AI in this station. There are like true experts on AI that are going to be speaking at the grill if you want to get their perspective. And then of course there's you mentioned IP, Mattel CEO is going to be speaking at the grill. And then of course Gerber Kawasaki is going to have a panel on the future of live entertainment with Ross Gerber is going to be on it. So we are so excited. The Wrap Zone CEO is Sharon Waxman is going to be at the event as well and moderating some great conversations. I mean, I might be a little bit biased, but like 10 out of 10 would recommend checking out the event. And then, because Gerber Kawasaki is awesome. We do have a discount code that you can get 20% off tickets to the grill. And the code is GK20. You can go to thewrap.com/thegrill and purchase your tickets there and see Ross speak. Again, it's happening October 4th. It's going to be at One Hotel, West Hollywood. And you should definitely come on out. And if you can't, again, I check out, coverage over just at the Wrap in general, because it's what we're trying to do. This conversation hopefully made it palatable for people, but so the grill goes even deeper. It brings in industry execs and it brings in technology experts, and I'm really excited about the conversations that are going to be had at the grill.
Yeah, I mean, we've been involved with the grill and the wrap for many years, and every year, there seems to be some really important conversations to be had, from succession and so forth. To this year, I think probably one of the most pivotal years, right, because of AI and the strike and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation, the panels that we're going to have. Yeah, thank you very much for being here, Andy. We really appreciate you jumping on and really kind of shedding some light and all the insights that you guys give us. Any last words?
No, let's get people back to work. Let's go. Like one of those politicians. Let's get America back to work.
Let's get it on the business side of things. Get back to work, people. There's money to be made.
Thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you.